All right, we are right at 5 o'clock, so I'm going to get started as a few people are still entering the meeting. We'll continue to admit them, but I just want to call the 92nd annual meeting of the Mount Desert Island Historical Society to order. This is Raney Bench. I'm the executive director here at the Historical Society, and I want to give a heartfelt thanks to everyone who is joining us here this afternoon. We're going to have our business portion at the first part of the meeting, and then we're going to spend some really great time reflecting a little bit on the legacy of Keep, Discover, and Celebrate as we look back at the last decade of Bill Horner's leadership and the changes to the MDI Historical Society that have taken place under his tenure. I just want to make a note, we are recording this, so if you could please make sure that your audio is on mute, and if you don't want to have your video running, you can go ahead and mute your video as well. We will have two portions of the meeting where we're going to ask for a vote from the membership. So at that time, you can unmute yourself to give a verbal yes or no. You're also able to respond in the chat feature, so we can record your votes that way. So we, as I mentioned, are going to sort of do a little reflection later, but starting with the business meeting, I noticed that Ham Clark, our treasurer, is here. So we're going to get started with the financial report, and I'm going to turn this over to Ham. Hopefully. Jenna, can you advance the slide? And maybe if Ham doesn't come on in a minute, Leah can.
I'm sorry. I was on.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Ham.
Okay, I was talking to myself. Apologize. I'm going to give you two reports. They're both results from 2021 calendar year, and then the short 6-month stub period in 2022 as we migrate to a new fiscal year plan. This is a process that we've been working for over a year now. Essentially, for the calendar year of 2021, the Society reported a net operating profit of $54,000 on revenue totaling $291,000, and that was driven by strong membership contributions, as well as tight expense management. So this year, for the first 6 months of the year, our stub year, running from January through June, the Society has had positive cash flow, but because of the traditional second half of the year calendarization of our member contributions, we did have a net loss of $22,000 for that period. And as we report future results, we will be reporting the fiscal year from July 2022 to June 2023. Just a couple of comments on our endowment. In 2021, our overall endowment grew by an impressive 28%, being managed by the Maine Community Foundation. And for the 6-month stub period through June of this year, the endowment was down by slightly more than 5%, reflecting the overall turmoil in the world markets. So that's essentially my report. Are there any questions, or Raney, would you like to proceed?
If anyone has questions or comments, they're welcome to share those in the chat, or you can use the board at the bottom to raise your hand, and that will elevate your square to the top so that we can see it. But I just wanted to really quickly emphasize that this annual meeting is actually a little bit unusual in that we're reporting 1.5 years. So we're switching our fiscal cycle, as Ham mentioned, to be away from a calendar year because our most profitable quarter was always the last quarter. So it was really difficult to be able to project our budgets and to be able to rely on that last quarter in the way that we were. And so by moving to a fiscal year, we should be able to have a better control over the budget management piece and to be able to anticipate more what our expenses are going to be based on actual income. So that's where you're seeing the fiscal year report from calendar year 2021, and then the first 6 months or the stub budget of 2022. And then now we're going to move to our fiscal year. So next year at the annual meeting, we'll report fiscal year 23. So if there are any questions or comments, Ham, I really appreciate your reporting out, and your role as treasurer has been, we really appreciate that work that you do for us.
Thank you.
All right, it does not look like we have any questions. So we will move on to the next aspect, which is with Bill Horner, who's going to be talking about the release of our annual report and the incoming class of board members and officers.
Yeah, thank you, Raney, and welcome everybody. Jenna, if you can put up the next slide. This is an image of our current annual report, and for the first time, it has reached a total of 7 pages. It serves to repeat a lot of the information that Ham just gave you. There's some commentary in there from Raney and Ben Purse and myself. And then there's a listing of our donors, and just want to say how appreciative we are of our expanding membership and the generosity of our donors. So you can access that either from the email that was sent out on the 29th of July, or going on the MDI Historical website. I think you can pick it up from there in a link, if I am stating it correctly. And Jenna, my minder, is nodding, so I think I just said something right for a change. So next, the board class. Each year, a class of board members graduates. And this year's graduating class consists of Peter Collier, Jamie McCown, Michael Pankow, John Wilson, and Jonathan Winthrop. However, I'm happy to say that all of the 5 named persons have agreed to re-up for another 3 years of participation on the board, which is always a thrilling development at this point in the year. Notable is the addition of Bonnie Rogers, who has actually been working with our development committee for a number of years and has finally agreed to come on the board. And we're grateful for that. So the only remaining step is for you, the membership, to vote these people in. So there you have them. And I'm not quite sure what the rules of digital voting are. Can you help me out, Jenna, or someone? How are we going to do this?
We're going to do it either verbally, or people can input in the chat. So we'll ask people to do one or the other. We need a motion and a second, and then we'll take the vote. Make sure to call for any votes against so that we can register if anyone votes against or abstentions.
So is there a motion to accept this slate of 6 board members, class of 22? Is that motion seconded?
I second that.
Moved and seconded. Assuming there doesn't really need to be any discussion, can we move the question? Will all those in favor of this slate, please indicate with a, I see someone figured out how to use their palm up. Oh, everybody's doing it. And saying aye, thumbs up. We're just having really interesting. Thank you so much. I can also vote myself, I think, and can say aye. So how are we doing?
We have a
here?
large number in the chat as well. So I think at this point, if you want to ask if there are any nays.
All right. Are there any nays? Hearing none, the vote passes without a doubt. Congratulations to these 6 members of the board. Now, next on the agenda is the slate of officers. And for the first time in an embarrassingly long time, there's a change at the top bracket, as we'll discuss a little further on. The current slate presented to the membership for the coming year is Ben Peirce as president, Michael Pankow as vice president, Ham Clark, treasurer, and Julia Gray, secretary. Is there a motion to accept this slate?
So moved.
I make a motion to accept this slate.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
I
the
second
motion.
it.
Is there discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please indicate by one electronic or visual or audible means or another. All the ayes are coming in fast and furious. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, seeing none, I pronounce this motion passed without a doubt. And thank you very much. I'm going to hand it back to Raney at this point.
Yes, thank you. And we can go to the next slide, Jenna. I'm really pleased to be able to once again announce the Ann Benson Award for Extraordinary Volunteer Service. This award was, can we go back? Was created in honor of an extraordinary volunteer here at the Historical Society who worked in our collections and on our board and in many other capacities for several years. I had a really great honor working with Ann Benson when I served on the board. And this spirit of volunteerism is so important to our organization. We're really small and we're incredibly effective and a really amazing organization in so many ways. And a lot of that relies on the help and support of our volunteers who give us so much time in all sorts of different ways and different things that we do in advance of our mission. And so one of those things is always kind of behind the scenes and not very well seen to the general public, and that's work with collections. And so this year's winner, Jennifer Heindel, has been working in our collections since 2018. She responded to an ad that was placed in the paper looking for additional volunteer support, and she thought working in the collections would be something that was interesting. She's a seasonal employee here, so she's not able to volunteer in the summers, but she doesn't have as much going on in the winter. So she decided to come in to answer that ad and has been volunteering every winter with us ever since. She's been a dutiful volunteer working really closely with the LaRue Spiker collection, literally processing thousands of slides and photographs taken by journalist and photographer LaRue Spiker from the 1950s to the 1970s. And she has just done a phenomenal job cataloging and adding those to our collections and digitizing them. And then over the course of this last winter, we were actually able to pay her a little bit to be able to help support fixing the collections records so that they could be exported to the History Trust digital archive site. And so thanks to Jen's leadership, we were actually able to add about 16,000 new digital records to digital archive and the History Trust. She's been phenomenal to work for and to work with. And so I'm just really appreciative of all the time that she has given to the Historical Society. So here, thank you so much, Jen. We look forward to having you back this winter. Yes. So with that, this concludes the official portion of our annual meeting. The business portion is now over, which is pretty painless. So we're going to move on now to our reflection of the leadership of Bill Horner over the last decade as we look back on the Society's motto of keep, discover, and celebrate. And I'm really pleased to welcome tonight our outreach coordinator, Jenna Jandreau, who's going to help moderate and facilitate this portion of the meeting.
Thank you so much, Raney. So just to kind of settle us in place with keep, discover, and celebrate, I'm going to be welcoming William Bill Horner, MD, who we all know, and Raney Bench and Ben Purse. We are going to be doing a retrospective of the years since Bill assumed presidency. And I'm with three people who are on the front lines of that progress. Bill as the president for the past 10 plus years, Raney serving on the board for a number of years before becoming executive director in 2020, and then Ben Purse, who has been serving on the board for the last few years and also was the chair of the development committee. So we asked our members to send us their favorite memories from the last 10 years, and we selected a few of those that we're going to share at the end of this program, so you don't want to miss them. I'm going to start this retrospective off with the man himself, Bill Horner, who was a retired surgeon who discovered a passion for history and for historical research. And Bill, I would love to learn more about how did this passion emerge? How did you discover this about yourself, and how did it strengthen your relationship with the Historical Society?
Well, it's a really interesting story, at least from my perspective, because when I retired, the question always is, particularly if you've been doing surgery for many, many years, is what's next? How am I going to occupy my time? And so I had an opportunity to think about this actually before I retired, when I wrote a very short history of a camp that we purchased up in northern Maine. And it occurred to me that the process whereby you acquire knowledge about history was very, very similar to what I was doing in my own practice. So I think the next slide may be a better indication of what I'm trying to say. I've always had a kind of fascination with words, particularly words that begin with A, like apotheosis and axolotl. And I got thinking about the word abdomen, because that's a word that surgeons think about a lot. As a general surgeon, you're routinely called to the emergency room to evaluate a patient who has abdominal pain or some other potential pain or catastrophe in their abdomen. And this requires taking a very, very, very careful history as the first step before you even get to the physical exam. So with my etymological interest in words beginning with A, I wondered what abdomen really meant. And so if you go back to the original Latin, which you can't see very well on this slide, abdere, I believe it's pronounced, it means that which is concealed. And that certainly described my many, many encounters of sick abdomens over my career, which was what is concealed within there. So when I retired, I found this family heirloom of a ship's portrait. And so I asked the same question: what is concealed in that painting? And then I found a photograph from my mother's collection, which is a formal photograph of 4 generations of the Deasy family from Gouldsboro and Prospect Harbor. The gentleman in your lower right, the whiskered gentleman with the white hair, is my great-great-grandfather, Daniel Deasy. On the left side, the younger man is his son, my great-grandfather, Luare Babson Deasy. Standing behind them is Blanche Deasy, who was my grandmother, and in front of her is my Uncle Bob, my mother's sister. Robert. Oh, brother. Yes, of course, he was my mother's brother. So what is concealed in this series of photographs and paintings? And that's really what got me started. As I did the history taking, as I searched the literature or the historical record, I began to gradually piece the story together and was encouraged by the executive director of the MDI Historical Society at the time, Charlotte Singleton, to perhaps write an article. And then I got a real kick in the pants from Jack Russell and Emily Beck. And so the first thing we knew, we had an article in the 2010 Chabaco pertaining to one of the people in that photograph, Luare B. Deasy. So little did I know that I was sticking my foot into the shallow end of a very big pond.
Well, it's great. And I love how one thing like learning the Latin root of a word can lead to something like a Chabaco article. And so it was a natural move, I guess, for you to take the helm of the MDI Historical Society. And that was in 2011. So I'm going to take us back in time a little bit and just show you what it was like in 2011 compared to now. So the budget was $111,000 in 2011, but in 2022, the board approved a budget of $283,000. We had 400 members in 2011 and 555-ish. This number wiggles a bit in 2022. In 2011, we had 100 Facebook followers, and now we have over 23,000. So we also had the great pleasure of having Tim Garrity as the executive director at that time. He was hired in September 2010 and served as the executive director until 2020. And then we had Chabaco in its great run at the time, but it was a little bit different than it is now. And we're going to talk about that more throughout the program. And in 2011, we had a series of programs called Celebrate 250. And Bill, I would love to talk to you about a key moment that you and I had discussed a little bit, involving a cruise on Somme Sound. And what exactly about this moment did you identify it as a watershed kind of key moment for the Historical Society?
Yeah, this was one of the Historical Society's contribution to many different organizations' celebration of 250 years since 1761, when the Solmes family arrived, and shortly thereafter, why am I blocking the name of the other people? And I'm going to get the devil from somebody, but anyway. Richardson, thank you. Phew, my wife to the rescue, as usual. So we came up with this idea of an historical tour of Somme Sound. This eventually became a booklet that's available at the Historical Society for a very small price. It was authored by Jack Russell in collaboration with one of the board members at the time, Ned Butler. And we were able to engage Rick Savage's Astaku and offered this historical tour of the Sound. And one of the first people I met as they were boarding was a woman who identified herself as Gail Clark. And she pointed out her husband, Ham, and said, this is my husband, Ham, and he was a history major. So that was a watershed moment in a way, as you will discover, because we were able to continue that conversation in other venues, and eventually Ham became one of the members of the board in my early period. We also had a number of other notables on board, including Samuel de Champlain, who, there he is in the bottom row. I actually met him the other day, not dressed up like that, and he remembered the event. But it was really quite a day. I do want to point out Jack with his looks like a Panama hat. I don't know where that went. But it was an extraordinary day. And as I say, we emerged from it with this wonderful booklet that I think could be a wonderful cruiser's guide, summer visitors and cruiser's guide to Somme Sound, because all of the historical locations are marked. There are even coordinates, latitude and longitude for them if you want to be really precise. And so that was the beginning, I think, of the sense that the Historical Society had multiple stories to tell about the island as a whole.
So you really showed your stuff in your first years as president. We have you here cheering on the MDI Historical Society's marathon team. We have you posing as Mr. and Mrs. MDI here at the Celebrate 250 event, and then sailing the Lewis story. So there's quite a variety of tasks, Ben, that you might have to be game for in the future. As you can see, you have big shoes to fill when it comes to the great variety of things that you get to do as president of the Historical Society. So I have some more photos that I had the pleasure of looking through over the last 10 years. This is from filming Dancing the Mill, which was, you see Ralph Stanley playing the fiddle. Some other familiar faces in this arrangement. These are other photographs from around 2013. We had the Great Fire, as we call it, of 2013 in the collections room. We have improvements and preservation actions to the space, new exhibits going up. And so around 2013, Bill, there was another watershed moment that you identified, and that took place in Otter Creek. Tell me a little bit about that special day.
Well, you've identified a lot of the highlights, and over the first couple of years that I was there with Tim, we really had a lot of ideas and a lot of things going. But we thought we'd try to vary the venue of our board meetings and schedule one for the old church in Otter Creek. And except for Raney Bench and Tim and me, nobody came. And it was a moment of, shall we say, reflection. But I think that particular point in time was when Tim first articulated the theme of keep, discover, and celebrate, which went a long way to helping us to define a new strategic plan, new thinking about the governance, about the geography of the Historical Society, about our commitment to collections, and about how we wanted to celebrate with the public. So
once
I see a couple of cues here. What do we do as a result of that?
So once you had yeah, established this kind of focus point, this real cohesive idea of keep, discover, and celebrate. How did that propel you forward into action? What did the Historical Society do at that point?
Well, we started to gather data, particularly on visitation of our two campuses, the one on Route 198, the Yellow Schoolhouse, where we had had some very substantial exhibits in the past. One, for example, that was particularly memorable were the architectural plans for many of the shingle-style houses designed by Fred Savage. It's a very elaborate visit there in the Yellow Schoolhouse. Then we had the other campus over in Soamesville, consisting of the small museum and the Selectmen's Building. There is a major difference, however, in those two locations. The speed limit on 198 is 50 miles an hour. At Soamesville is 25 miles an hour. And so we thought to ourselves, how visible is the Yellow Schoolhouse to people passing by quickly like that? And does that really justify our having exhibits there at the schoolhouse? So we said no, and we discussed this with the board, and we decided to make the Soamesville campus the center of exhibits, finding that we had larger visitation there. And then we felt that the Yellow Schoolhouse could be more of a keep, that is a safe place for our records, with our climate-controlled storage, with a working space that people could come to, and a venue that was of historical value in itself as the original schoolhouse of sound. And Tim was able to enlist a wonderful group of actors to come in and help with our vintage schoolroom, which was initially Maud March was the school mom for many, many years. And I want to give her a shout out because she's only recently retired. She did a wonderful job. And this vintage schoolhouse has gone right through until today and is really well received by school departments on the island.
So one of the other,
And just let me just mention a couple of other things. We really worked hard to strengthen our governance and organizational structure. When I first came on, the entire board was meeting once a month, and that just proved to be unwieldy until we, through this keep, discover, and celebrate thinking, thought that our full board meetings should concern strategic thinking and could be held on a quarterly basis. At the same time, we worked to strengthen our committee structure, which would continue to meet on a monthly basis and take up many of the tactical decisions that had to be made. And then when there was a question or a problem coming forth, we would draft it as a strategic question and take that to the full board. So that was a major organizational change. You've already mentioned the strategic plan of 2013. And then the final thing I want to mention is Tim's contribution to the evolution of Chabaco. What Tim brought to the organization was an intellectual depth, a connection with the University of Maine, with College of the Atlantic, himself a talented writer. I later took an adult senior college, Acadia Senior College course from him. He taught me a lot, and it was through this impetus that we decided that Chabaco was our flagship in a way. And it was through his impetus that we developed this idea of deciding upon an annual theme and coalescing not only Chabaco, but all of our other activities around that single theme. Great step forward.
It certainly helps from a planning perspective to also have that cohesion, to have that one annual theme. And so at this point, the society has really established a clear vision, a renewed sense of purpose, and the programs and publications are starting to orbit around that annual theme and fall into place. So Raney was witness to all of this. And thank you, Bill, so much for bringing us back in time and telling us some of these stories. I loved going through the photographs for the last 10 years. It was really a pleasure. So we're going to learn a little bit about this time period from some of the other people that were in that group. So Raney had the experience of being on the board for some years before she became the executive director. And so from your point of view, while you were on the board and now as a leader in administration, what is your idea for what helped propel the society forward?
I think that the relationship between Tim and Bill was critical during this point, that they were both such incredibly passionate advocates for local history and wanting to make sure that they shared that love with as many people as possible. And so that aspect of making history relevant, which I think the Historical Society is really good at doing today, started to flourish during their relationship, and the way that the board built out from that was also a critical piece. As you mentioned, everything started to come together, and I remember being on the board and talking about the incredible work that went into Chabaco and that we weren't necessarily leveraging it to its full capacity. And so wanting to start to create exhibitions around the scholarship that was Chabaco, lecture series, classes, different ways that we could take that work and bring it to broader audiences in a lot of different ways. And so we saw the growth of the organization, not only in terms of our own maturity, but also in our outreach to the broader community. And because we were able to do that and tell these island-wide stories that were really outwardly focused, and we wanted to engage with all of these different people to create a lot more energy around the Historical Society, collaboration became a key part of the organization. And this was something that I valued so much as a board member and a nonprofit leader, as I watched the leadership of Tim and Bill really working their way out to partner organizations, individuals, Tim's relationship with the University of Maine being critical, Bill's relationship with other sort of citizen historians or non-professional historians who he would get to be engaged with the organization in a variety of capacities. And collaboration really became our backbone during this period of time. And so recruiting new board members who were passionate about outreach and history and collaboration allowed the organization to really launch forward into a much more effective organization at meeting our mission.
So I just went through a couple of slides with some more photos from these years of progress. And we have here a little bit showing this annual theme idea again, and these telling broad island stories. This is a portrait of an island, and there was Bill and this man pictured here. I'm sorry, Bill, what do you know his name? Because I've now forgotten it. Who built the George Dory?
No, it's not Peter. I'm not sure who it is. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Put you right on the spot. So now this is about the mid 2015, 2016, and we're gaining some momentum here. And one of the board members that Raney mentioned, Rick Wheeler, actually recruited Ben Purse to the board in 2017. So Ben, when Rick asked you if you'd be interested in serving on the board, what made you say yes?
Well, Jenna, as many of us know, Rick can be very persistent, and he doesn't give up. No, he was great, and I've always appreciated the fact that he and others even thought of me. But what really resonated for me, Jenna, was the mission of the MDI Historical Society of engaging in island histories. Resonates with me as my extended family, and there are a lot of us in the Peirce and Elliott clan on Mount Desert Island. We're in our 7th generation of visiting here and living here. A lot of us live on the island. And so the island's people and the places, as we've talked about, and the history have had a lasting allure for me. And I wanted to learn more. I wanted to share more, and I wanted to say thank you for all that the island has done for me personally, and also for my extended family.
So shortly into your term on the board, you wrote an article for the 2018 Chabaco, and the theme of that year was beholding the past. So tell us about your experience writing Chabaco article.
Well, I'm not much of a writer, but Tim was very persuasive to say there is a story here, and the article was entitled "A Coffee Pot: From the American Revolution to a Lasting Mount Desert Island Legacy." And Jenna, it's the tale of how my family's summer home on Peabody Drive, 131 Peabody Drive in Northeast Harbor, came into being 105 years ago. Probably a lot of us on this Zoom tonight have driven right by it. And maybe you see a little wooden sign tacked to a tree. Not quite like some of the other signs along Peabody Drive, but if you look down that dirt driveway, there's an old wooden house that looks over the Great Harbor. And that's the coffee pot. And there has always been family lore about the coffee pot as to how it came to be. And so researching the history with cousins of mine, a number of them, discovering long lost details about the house. And there is a picture of the coffee pot that still exists. It's out at the Minneapolis Art Institute, I believe, today. That picture in the center is of the living room. If you walk in today, it's almost virtually the same. And some people would shake their heads, but there it is. But researching, finding long lost details, and some of the historical coincidences were just really got my attention. It was a lot of fun. But then more importantly, how to make the story relevant to today was a challenge. But in the end, it was a really rewarding result from trying to put all these pieces together. It was a great deal of fun.
I loved your article in this edition, and this volume of Chabaco is one of my favorites. It takes a real granular look at some objects and other items, and this was a fantastic interpretation of this item and your family's story. So thank you for contributing that. And I know exactly what it's like to be diverted by some little detail in historical research. And I've chatted with Raney before and mentioned, a great theme for Chabaco could even be diversion, falling down the rabbit hole. So Raney, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Chabaco and the annual themes.
Yeah, I think Tim instituted sort of the forming a theme around Chabaco each year as a way of being able to create some cohesion in the articles and also to recruit authors in a way that made it easier. So from looking back at this incredible array of the journal, and it's as you say, journey of a journal, in 2012 is the first edition that we see a cohesive theme start to develop. And so the earlier journals are fantastic and really informative and interesting, but it's the topics are widely varying and even include poetry initially in some of the early ones. But with Tim's uniting vision, we've been able to go through year after year and sort of create these thematic publications, which then allow us to build public programs and exhibitions from that theme. And like I said earlier, leverage the work that goes into Chabacco into a public program series with a little bit more clarity. And it also really helps in recruiting authors. We can look to people with something more specific that we're seeking for a historian or if either professional or a citizen historian who might be interested in learning more about a given topic and be able to create a sense of unity for our readers so that as they go through the journal, they're exploring a specific topic as well. And so a lot of people, well, we have people who read it cover to cover the minute they get it, but then other people who tell me that in the morning over their cup of coffee, they read an article each day. So however people approach reading it, I think this cohesive theme allows them to stick with the content in a way that's a little bit more educational and empowering. And then as you see in the last 4 editions, we have the addition of Jennifer Steen-Boer as our artist in residency. And Chabacco really at this point transforms itself from a really fascinating and academic scholarly journal about the history of the island to something that also physically represents the quality of the work that goes into the writing. And so this last 4 years and now into the future, being able to artistically render and have these really creative visual aspects to Chabacco enhances it in such a beautiful way that it makes it so much more interesting, both visually and intellectually. And that's also enabled it to win National Leadership in History Awards and been recognized for its excellence. So it's been an amazing transition, and it's a humbling experience to take this incredibly powerful piece of our work over as in my leadership. And be able to continue to grow. As you can see, it's grown in its scholarship and its voice and its vision, really capturing those island-wide stories to be able to understand each of our communities has its own history and it has its own organization that is really excellent at interpreting that history. But our whole story is of an island. And so being able to capture that diversity through Chabacco and then now through our various other programs is something that I think is a really powerful aspect of our work that is directly accredited to Tim and Bill's leadership.
Thank you. So one of the additions there towards the bottom right that you see with the old string kind of tied around that stack of books, that is, I had the pleasure of editing that edition. That is the Champlain Society logbooks. And Bill, I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about what engaged scholarship looks like, what inspired scholarship looks like, and how the Champlain Society logbooks play into that idea.
Primary resources. I think that's the bottom line. These are examples of primary resources. I mean, just look at these photographs. In the upper right-hand corner, 1880 Champlain Society report. These were a bunch of Harvard guys who came up here. They were obviously bright. They were obviously science-oriented. They each had a specific task to do. Some of them were interested in geology, others botany, others amphibians, birds. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But here we have the original recordings and the photographs that document the time. And I think that inspired scholarship is a process whereby if you find the primary documents, the original writings, the original word, then you can create your own interpretation without relying on somebody else to interpret that for you with their own bias. So it sounds a bit academic, but I think it's something that we will continue to encourage community or citizen historians, if you will, we will encourage the school system to think about the primary resources, because in a way that helps kids to develop intellectual curiosity. And that's an important quality to try to encourage, particularly in young kids, for them to try to find the originals and make their own interpretations. So that's one thing. And I think too, Raney's already referred to it, but scholarship should not be owned. It should be shared. We should consider ourselves stewards of these resources and share them freely among ourselves. And in order to do that, the individual of necessity has to expand their purview. This is the beginning of the story, but then how did it develop? And then work out relationships through collaboration that bring multiple resources together and help those organizations to grow in a manner whereby the end product is greater than the sum of its individual parts. So that's what we've tried to do in our efforts. And I think we're having some success, actually.
Well, a couple of successful program or partner collaborations for sure are certainly the History Trust, which we've talked about, and the digital archives. Leaps and bounds that have happened with that in the last couple of years is really exciting. And then also the Landscape of Change project, which directly emerged from the Champlain Society logbooks. If I go back one slide here, you'll see those photographs. You see the primary resources, and then we have Maureen Fournier, who volunteered to transcribe all of those notebooks, which we then published in Chabaco a couple of years ago, or last year. And then partnered up with 5 other organizations on Landscape of Change, including Schoodic Institute, which has now created a 1-year final report on what community scientists have contributed for data and how that compares to the Champlain Society's data from over 100 years ago. So it makes it, history's relevance is demonstrated time and again, and especially when we can bring these partner resources together. So Bill, we have one more watershed moment that I'd really like to squeeze into our meeting before we have to wrap up. And that is Tim's Acadia Senior College class on borderlands. And also it was a Chabaco theme, the Acadian borderland. And why do you think that was a key moment for the Historical Society?
That was in 2015, 2016, and it's correlated actually with the centennial of the National Park Service and Acadia National Park. And so there was a lot of thinking about borders, about geography, about the frontiers. And so Tim taught a course through the Acadia Senior College called Borderlands History, and I'd never heard of the idea before, and I tried to get my head into it. And with the help of one of our former board members, Tova Mellon, I'm going to make a huge shout out for her because I think she's absolutely brilliant. She was a COA graduate. She was in on the original Friends of Island History. She did some surveys for us. She was on the board of the Historical Society. She wrote a couple of wonderful introductory essays in this particular 2016 version. And what she was able to help me to understand is that borderlands are places not necessarily defining physical boundaries between land masses, but places of encounter between people. And oftentimes they're people with very different points of view. And how does that coming together in that discourse, how does that resonate through history? And if you look back on some of the things that we celebrate, like the auto wars of the early decade of the 20th century here on the island, perfect example of a borderlands history where we had people on one side who wanted to maintain the horse buggy style of transportation. We had other people who wanted the automobiles in. And so there is this tension, but what it becomes is an actual center, a central focus for the development of the story. And it's something possibly that we can learn from because it's still happening today. We still have those borderlands. We still have controversy. We still have things that we have to confront, but figure out a way to resolve very different points of view. Cruise ships may be a moderate example. I won't go to the Norwegian fish farms, but I mean, it just seems as though history repeats itself over and over again. And if you can look at it through this lens of borderlands history, it makes a whole lot more sense, and I think makes the stories very, very much more interesting.
Well, thank you, Bill, for that. And I did promise that I would share some memories that I had asked of our members, and so I'm going to do that now. One of the memories that was shared was by Maureen Fournier, who was pictured very recently with the Champlain Society logbooks. And she said, my favorite single memory was the Champlain Society cruise, which was supposed to have taken us around MDI and point out the shoreline locations mentioned by the members of the society in their logbooks, except the Friendship and attendees never left Frenchman Bay because of heavy, dense fog. Speakers had to rely on the imagination of their audience to tell the story of the Harvard barbarians. My other favorite memory / accomplishment was digitizing and transcribing the Champlain Society logbooks and bringing this wonderful collection to a new life off the shelves and out of the box. And I'm showing you the invitation to this event because I couldn't find a fogged in picture in an entire, I think you all were trying to repress that one experience. And I put a couple of family photos, I called them, up here. We have Ham Clark being interviewed by Betsy Hewitt for a History Harvest event. That was when I was first working at the Historical Society back in 2018, I believe. Julia Gray and Ben Purse accepting one of the awards for tobacco. I did include my favorite memory, which was of myself dressing as Rosie the Riveter, because I love to get letters from Bill Horner that say, Dear Rosie, because it reminds me of that day. And of course, we have Bill, we have Tim and Raney and Tim's retirement get together, which had to be teeny tiny because of COVID. So those are a few family photos I squeezed in there. We also had a memory submitted by Peter Collier, who said, introducing my son, age 6 at the time, to the Society's work on the Landscape of Change project last summer at the Soamesville Gardens and Museum. As he grows up in an ever-changing world, I value all opportunities to open his eyes to what is changing all around us in our own backyard. I'm proud to support this critical work and celebrate partnerships among fantastic local nonprofits working together to make a meaningful impact on future generations. And then, Bill, you knew it was coming. This is a photo of Captain Hornerblower submitted by his brother-in-law, Bill Powder. So we did have to include that. That is Captain Hornerblower coming ashore in Pretty Marsh. So those are some of the great memories that we had. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ben Purse to start us off in our closing remarks.
So, Bill, the Historical Society has come a long ways under your leadership, and you've listened, the Society's listened, we've adapted, and we're moving forward. And we have some exciting and evolving new vision that we'll be sharing with audiences in the very near term that we think will continue to demonstrate our relevance to this dynamic community. And you have been at the heart of all of this. So thank you. But Raney, a few additional words and then we'll close it out.
I just wanted to offer the thanks of the society, the staff, and the board for Bill's leadership. It's been transformative for me personally and professionally, as Bill has become a dear friend to me and a mentor in so many ways. And the fact that he endless, I should say, supports my risk-taking and my visions and the ways that I envision taking the society as we think about where we want to be when we turn 100. He's been really instrumental in doing that. And so we have a tribute that we just wanted to offer in gratitude for Bill's leadership as he is staying on the board. Thankfully, we are not letting him leave the board, but he retires his presidency and Ben succeeds him in that position. I'll turn it back to Ben for just a word of gratitude on our tribute to Bill.
Really. Bill, as you probably know, I may have told you this, you are one of my heroes. And that don't smirk. I know you don't like to be shouted out like this, but you are one of your heroes. And what makes up a hero to me is that, one, you are really great at everything you do. You do things with excellence, and it's wonderful to behold. You, secondly, at least in my estimation, and maybe your wife would contend with this, but you're a wonderful human being. You're just a lovely soul, and that is important. And then, kind of interestingly for me, a hero is someone who is fun. And you are a lot of fun, as is shown with Captain Hornerblower right there on the screen. And you're truly a man for all seasons. You spot snowy owls in the wintertime, and you fish in cold spring streams, and you hike, and you research, and you write, and you sail. You don't win very often, apparently, when you sail, but you do sail, and you love Penobscot Bay, and so much more. You are one of my heroes, and they're big. Your shoes are big to fill, but I'm grateful you're staying around, and so is the society. So in recognition of all that you have done for the society and all that is still ahead, on behalf of the board and the membership, I am privileged to present to you, this is going to sound a little strange, a sculpted sailboat from the Granite Garden Gallery in Sullivan, Maine. Yes, this is a sailboat that is made of granite. But we thought that and I apologize, we don't have it here to present to you personally, but we will inscribe it appropriately, and we will install it this fall at the Soamesville campus of the Museum and the Gardens, and it will be there forever. And that forever is important. It will always remind us, your friends, your family, and future visitors of your strength, your passion for history, and your elegance. And so this annual meeting, in which we've talked about keeping and discovering and celebrating, by celebrating you, Bill Horner, with heartfelt thanks from all of us associated with this society. Thank you so very much, Bill.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Bill, we had a couple of extra chimes in on the chat that I would love to read to you before we let you close us out with some remarks. Tim Garrity says, congratulations to Bill on your new launching. You did a wonderful job. You were uniquely positioned to bridge the worlds of year-rounders and summer people. I can't thank you enough for your work and friendship. And Julia Gray also says, it has been a pleasure and wonderful learning experience to serve under your leadership, Bill. Thank you for your leadership, Bill, says Bonnie. Bill, we'd love to hear a couple of words from you, and then we're going to close up the meeting.
Well, thank you very much. This is, you really created a kind of a to-do here. And, but truthfully, I think that is a beautiful sculpture. I love the curved mast. It reminds me of my favorite boat, which is the S boat. But anyway, I won't go off into that characteristic digression. It's about the team, folks. It's about building the team, maintaining the team, being grateful for the team, and I think respecting people's willingness to share their skills, their intelligence, their professionalism for free on a nonprofit board. And I can't think of any group I have ever been associated with where there has been that sense of giving and expertise and fun and respect. I'm going to miss, no, I'm not going to miss doing the agenda for next week's executive committee meeting. But I do want to stay involved because we've got a lot more interesting work to do. There's just so much out there, and I'm thrilled to be able to continue to be a part of it. So thank you very much. This has been wonderful. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you, Bill. Everyone's giving you a great and well-deserved round of applause. It's all quiet, but we can hear them in our hearts. And then, of course, it's time now, Ben. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the seat. Okay, so are we all set, Mr. Purse, to conclude our meeting?
I think we can adjourn this meeting, Jenna. Thank you for your moderation of it all, and thanks to all who participated. A great time together. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.